One of the most tragic things about the current public debate on the EU is that both sides have engaged in the politics of fear, rather than a debate which prioritises hope and aspiration about the kind of society that we want to see, both at a national and international level. Yes, a referendum and a debate about a referendum is naturally binary, given that our choices are yes or no, remain or leave. But across both campaigns, the messages and the calls to action have been based on divisiveness and negative speculation. The In campaign, for example, has posited that if we vote to leave the EU, Britain would decrease its influence in the world, or that there is no future for Britain adopting a go-it-alone approach, or that the negative effects on the British economy in the case of a Brexit are profound and damning, or the cost to British jobs, entrepreneurs and small businesses are incomprehensible, the losses on international trading opportunities, the dangers to British national security, the risks of international insecurity and instability, the risks to the unity of the United Kingdom. We've all heard these discussions again and again, and the overall message is about what people have to lose if Britain leaves the EU. Turning to the Leave campaign, if we vote to stay, according to the Leave campaign, the dangers and risks of continuing to engage in the EU's bureaucracy, indecisiveness and lethargy are again so great that we can't possibly consider it. The dangers of immigration, undermining national security and stability, and essentially this is again about what people have to lose if Britain stays within the EU. And furthermore, to add to all of that, both sides then accuse each other of inspiring fear and relying on negativity in the opposite campaigns. But who are the real losers here in this debate, in this equation of fear and negativity? The real losers are younger people, the millennials, Gen Y, the terms which characterise those who sometimes they're referred to as between 18 and 24 years old, sometimes between 18 and 35. This is a generation that's already more distrustful and less engaged with the political establishment, with the democratic process, and with political institutions. And whether we vote to stay in or leave the EU, this debate is of critical importance for this generation, who will live through the changes that we enact after this referendum. So this problem is as much about the democratic deficit in relation to younger people. The youth turnout rate in the UK is the lowest of the 15 members of the old European Union. Voters aged 18 to 24 in Sweden turn out to vote at double the rate of their peers in the UK. Only about half of under 35s say they'll definitely vote, and that's likely to be even less as people tend to overstate their voting behaviours. And compare this to the Scottish referendum, which mobilised everyone, including, or perhaps even especially, the 16 and 17-year-olds who were allowed to vote. It's disappointing that we haven't achieved that level of mobilisation and engagement, and it's disappointing, I think, that 16 and 17-year-olds haven't been given the vote in the referendum. There's also a very large gulf in opinion between older and younger people on issues such as migration and on their internationalist outlook. The millennial generation is more likely to be concerned with environmentalism and other global issues such as human rights and humanitarian aid. They are less interested with or aligned with traditional notions of sovereignty. We are more comfortable with migration. And often these expectations and these political motivations are manifested in different issues-based forms of political engagement, campaigning activities, online activities. And as a generation, we tend to hold more multifaceted cosmopolitan identities and the aspiration to be a citizen of the world. So in this regard, perhaps this generation is more likely to engage with perceptions of the global common good, rather than concepts of neighbourliness and civic engagement closer to home. And possibly have different perceptions of solidarity and human agency as a result. On the whole, this outlook means that younger voters are more likely to want to stay in the EU. Polls indicate that 2/3 or more of the under 35s will opt to stay in, whereas the over 55s, the picture is almost the reverse. However, this is the 2/3 of those under 35s who do actually turn up and vote on the day. So how do we overcome the failings of the public debate in inspiring and captivating the attention of younger people to get engaged and involved? This is something, of course, which goes beyond the immediate subject of the EU and applies to politics more generally. For a start, for the younger generation as much as others, polarised debate is a massive turn-off. The fear factor results in mirror arguments of the same issues and risks the debates descending into a continuous case of he said, she said. One politician recently said that continuing EU membership would destroy young people's dreams of getting on the housing ladder. But rather than the negative consequences and using terms like that, let's think instead about building those dreams and using hope and aspiration as a positive force. Not just the individual narrative of what do I want or what's in it for me, and not even the Silicon Valley style debate around we can do anything we want, so let's go out there and get it. But instead, how do I want to live in a world in which others exist too? And how can we live together? What responsibilities do we have to those around us, immediately, at home, and across borders? And what sort of society do we want to build together? And how do we work together to make those asks of others? Now, to give credit to the Leave campaign, there have been a couple of individuals I've noticed who have been trying to make those arguments about being a stronger, more courageous, more ambitious force, but they're drowned out in the rest of the public debate. And, to be positive again, what can we learn from the EU referendum debate so far? We can learn that politicians can work together across partisan boundaries and affiliations and traditional divides. And in a similar way to the Scottish independence referendum, we can see different parties, different politicians who would usually be estranged from each other, coming together in a united voice. So the title of today's discussion is A Balance of Interests. How can we achieve that balance of interests, both national and international, but also a balance of immediate interests and long-term interests? Interests which rely on relationships with others, the interests of this generation, and the interests of the next generation too. I have a couple of observations and potentially recommendations for people who want to engage in a more positive discussion. Firstly, let's stop talking about the economy as the driving force for the public debate. It's an important issue, but it's an abstract one. It's highly relevant, but as an academic concept. When we try to translate economics into reality, we either end up with large arbitrary figures or very specific estimates about how much better off we as individuals we would be, rather than how much better off we would be as a society together. And of course the economy is related to other issues: public sector budgets, the labour market and job security, migration and the workforce. These are all affected by the economy, but the primacy of the economy is something which we see in daily debate, and it doesn't result in productive conversations about the good we want to see. And if we must talk about the economy, then let's not just talk about what we get, but let's also think about what we give back, because the economy is built on relationships and reciprocal interaction. Second, perhaps we can rethink the purpose and the language of institutions. Another common statistic around about young people is that we are less likely to trust institutions and hold traditional community affiliations and participate within traditional community groups. Yet peer-to-peer platforms are growing as tools for exchange online and elsewhere. So how can institutions go beyond their conventional roles and facilitate these relationships to happen more and more productively too? In the case of the EU, let's talk about what the EU is for. Let's talk about what the EU was built for, let's talk about what it does now, and let's talk about what it can do in future. In terms of uniting political will and also social aspiration. In terms of economic sustainability, whether that's through a common market or a single market, but also in terms of the way in which we relate to each other, engage with each other as part of that economy. And let's also think about the EU as another opportunity for democracy, a way in which to make a commitment to others around the world beyond the cycle of national elections too. And perhaps that allows us an opportunity to engage with the more immediate nature of the political system, which Gen Y want more of. Whatever the outcome of the referendum, the UK will have to continue to engage with Europe, European institutions and others around the world. And one of the biggest travesties of the referendum, even more so than the nature of the debate so far, would be if after it happens, we went back to stalemate. If we leave, there will be decades of negotiation. You can't dismantle an institution that has been built up over the last 40 years in a day. So we need to continue to engage in that debate, and we need to decide actively and positively how we want to do that. If we vote to remain, then the in vote doesn't have to be a remain vote. It doesn't have to be a vote to stay the same. It can be a vote to believe in a better world and to use the tools we have of international diplomacy, of international institutions, and a vote, a mandate in a different forum to make that happen. And I think we can focus in either case of going beyond the focus on politics of bad faith to the politics of good news, something which faith communities are very good at, much better than the modern media and modern politicians. And we can be more ambitious and more courageous about that public discussion too. This is a moral argument, even though the term morality doesn't always resonate with people from all ages and all backgrounds. It is about how we pool our individual and collective resources and aspirations and use this opportunity of a referendum, a national conversation, to move forward no matter what, and have that conversation in a genuine way, and create new forms of public friendship both within the UK and across national borders. And it would be a wasted opportunity if, regardless of how we vote or what the turnout is, we didn't use this opportunity to do that.